The Atari 2600, previously known as the Atari VCS, was the most successful home system of its generation. There are also around 600 video games on the system, and they were all released between the years 1977 and 2025, with 524 people from 188 developers and publishers credited with these titles. I mean, gee whiz, that's pretty impressive stuff for back then. And also, the Atari 2600 was home to many popular games that sold millions of copies, a figure unheard of before. In fact, there are 25 video games released on the Atari 2600 which sold at least 1 million copies, of which 14 were developed and or published by the console's manufacturer, Atari. Other manufacturers with multiple entries in the top 25 are Activision with 6 titles, Imagic with 3 titles, and the Parker Brothers with 2 titles. And 3 of the games in the top 25 were programmed by David Crane, 3 by Howard Scott Warshaw, 3 by Rob Fulop, and 2 by Bradley J. Stewart. All of them legends. So today I wanted to look at these top 25 best-selling games of the Atari 2600. So let's get going, shall we?
Have you played Atari today?
We have no choice. He can't turn back.
Raid target at 039 under control.
Approaching near speed.
Way to go.
626.
Taking West Canyon.
Good call. Fuel critical, sir. Choppers at 3 o'clock.
Roger, I copy.
Time is close. We still have to exit. No, he'll decide that. Fuel critical, sir.
He knows that. Sure, he's opting for these canyons.
Negative. That's a trap.
Raid, don't sweep home and Teddy.
River Raid, can you make it? River Raid, can you make it? Do you copy?
It's only a game. River Raid for the Atari video computer system, designed by Carol Shaw for Activision.
Right, first up at number 25 is River Raid. And River Raid is a 1982 shoot-'em-up video game developed and published by Activision for the Atari 2600, of course. And this game, well, it was designed by Carol Shaw, who made games for Atari before joining Activision and before working on River Raid. Inspired by the game Scramble, a 1981 game, Shaw set out to make a game that had a continuously scrolling screen. And she also programmed and designed the game herself, occasionally getting advice from other Activision staff. Now, River Raid was one of the best-selling games of 1983 and the second best-selling Atari 2600 video game of the year, after Mrs. Pac-Man. It received year-end awards from the Video Game Update and the Arcade Awards. And the game was also ported to several other consoles and computers, and received a sequel in 1988. Even today, it has continued to receive praise as one of the best games for the Atari 2600 from various publications. So, let's have a look at the game. So, in the game, you take the role of a pilot flying down a river shooting up a bunch of bad guys. Why? Because they're evil. That's why. I mean, come on, there's nothing better than wasting government money or ammunition than blowing up evil bad guys to smithereens. It's certainly been proven time and time again in many of these shooters. Fantastic. Anyway, in River Raid, we are sitting in a B-1 Stratowing assault jet that is retrofitted with rapid-fire guided missiles and has the ability to both accelerate and slow down easily. And this jet is going down the river of no return, where it is on a mission to break the enemy blockades and halt troop advances. The river in the game has no actual ending, and it does scroll infinitely. Sure, it's a little bit repetitive, but what the hell, it's fun. And I have to say, the controls are quite easy. River Raid is played with the joystick. The player can control movement left and right on the screen and forward and backward to accelerate and slow down respectively. You can also shoot missiles with the joystick's button to destroy enemy tankers, helicopters, fuel depots and bridges. And the goal in River Raid is to collect as many points as possible before crashing or running out of fuel. And I have to say, fueling up can be a bit of a bitch. And this fueling can be collected from flying over a fuel depot to fill up the gauge that is displayed at the bottom of the screen. As the river progresses, there will be fewer fuel tanks. as I said, it can be a bit of a bitch. Be careful, because the player loses one of their jets if they collide with a riverbank or enemy objects. If they have remaining jets, the player restarts play at the same section of the river they crashed. And if you manage to destroy the bridge at the end of the section, the player will restart at the bridge upon losing a life. Now, I have to say, this game certainly gets harder as you progress and requires you to shoot more, dodge more and fuel up more. Just the way of any action game should be though, fast and progressively harder. Now, I have to say, there is no music in the game, but you do get to hear the authentic sound that a jet in midair makes, and that breathtaking whir. And also, there aren't too many other sound effects to complement the game, but there are a few. This mainly consists of your usual explosive sounds and high-pitched tones of refueling. Now, that certainly doesn't sound like very much, but if you think about how many Atari 26 games have awful and irritating sound effects, hearing these sound effects makes one very thankful. And also for me, in my opinion, Activision certainly seem to have done better in the Atari era than any other era. Their games of old, they were absolute classics, they really were. So, River Raid for me is forever etched as a classic shoot 'em up. It certainly had a significant influence on future shooters. Its descendants come in many forms with many replacements for the jet. You know, dragons, angelic beings, people on flying carpets. But no matter what you put on its place, it's the same elements that guide you down that long path to either completion or game over. Perhaps the only thing standing in its way of perfection is the repetition that the game has. But, as I said, River Raid helped to create a genre that would be popular in arcades and even popular at home. Fair to say 2D shooters aren't as plentiful as they were back in the day, but this game is still enjoyed and still revered. River Raid is a piece of shooter ecstasy.
Have you played Atari today?
Can Indiana Jones escape from the forces of evil? Can he survive 13 fiendish situations? Will Indy make it all the way? Find out in Atari's Raiders of the Lost Ark adventure game. It's diabolically difficult. It's mysterious. It's never the same twice. And it's only from Atari.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is a graphical adventure game released in 1982 for the Atari 2600. In the game, it was developed by Howard Scott Warshaw. Now, I have to say, this game is ambitious. There are a bunch of different screens containing obstacles and items as you control Indy as he searches for the Lost Ark. Now, I suppose you could compare it to the game Adventure, released 3 years earlier, except it was a step back in most ways. The only notable improvement by this game over the game Adventure was the graphics. Instead of controlling a mobile square dot, your hero actually looks like a crude representation of a person wearing a hat. But I have to say, it's probably the only notable visual improvement, as the screens tend to be sparsely decorated, and the other inhabitants of the game's world tend to fall into the exactly what the hell is that category, more than likely than not. However, I suppose this may not come as a surprise when you consider the technical limitations of the Atari 2600. But anyway, let's have a look at the game. So, you basically control Indiana Jones as he searches for this lost ark. The game requires you using the two different controllers. Controller 2 moves Jones and its button uses an item. Controller 1 selects the item to use and its button drops the item. The video game is set in the city of Cairo in 1936, represented by an entrance room and a marketplace. And from the entrance room, the player can blast a hole in the wall with a grenade and enter the Temple of the Ancients. 2 paths await inside the temple, both of which contain various dangers, after which the player will at last find the treasure room. Gold and artifacts can be picked up in the treasure room, which will help the player later in the game. Now, you then must cross a mesa on the other side, which lies the map room, where the location of the Lost Ark is revealed. South of the map room is the Thieves' Den and a black market. The black market contains various figures such as 2 sheiks, a tsetse fly and a lunatic, and items needed to win the game, mostly notable a shovel. And after acquiring all needed items from the various rooms, you then return to the mesa and jump off using a parachute. You then go inside the mesa via a small hole at the end of a branch and digs up the ark after dodging more thieves. Now, I suppose essentially only lip service was really given to the movie. For example, you know how Indy has that fear of snakes? Well, they're certainly in the game, but as weak, unimposing monsters that can easily be dispatched by either his whip or gun. And then there's much more dangerous foes that are in the game, but I certainly don't remember seeing them in the film. And if you make a wrong turn at one point, you'll end up in a little dead-end room with no treasure. However, there is a giant blob-like thing representing a spider, which will fire paralysing webs at you and then attempt to savage your unmoving body. It's probably for the best that movie Indy never actually run into this beast, and all those Nazi types would seem far less threatening after overcoming that super spider. Later on, you'll reach a second, more secret marketplace. Markets are kinda cool as you collect money in the game and can use it in these places to buy bullets and other useful things. And in this one, you can also try to interact with a giant head plastered on the left side of the screen, which will then kill you. Gosh, you certainly have to love that trial and error puzzle solving. In fact, you're not really supposed to interact with it at all or walk above or below it. In fact, you should really pretend that that third of the room doesn't really exist. Like the giant spider, Mr. Crazy Face is just an easily avoidable death trap. And I would say those death traps are only really a factor the first time you play this game. Raiders of the Lost Ark is this sort of painfully linear experience that really makes me appreciate the foresight used in creating adventure. Yes, again, I've mentioned that game again. Now, you don't have that hook in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You will search the right rooms to find the necessary artefacts. Then, you will go to a particular room to use a medallion to find out which mesa in a large area contains the Ark. Next, you use a grappling hook to reach whatever mesa is your objective, and follow that by falling off it and using a parachute to avoid a tree limb, so you can reach a hole. This part of the game takes players longer to master than the find the necessary items and markets part, as you tend to need absolutely perfect timing and positioning to avoid death and other minor setbacks. But eventually you will. It's not an impossible challenge, just one that can feel cruelly unfair. Now, you only have to traverse one little room to get the Ark. All you have to do is avoid a few scampering thieves and use your shovel to dig up the Ark. The first time I got this far, I was so excited that I blundered into a thief. And the fecker, well, he stole my shovel. And I have to say, it took me months before I emotionally recovered enough to try the bloody game again. And I have to say, the sad thing is, it really wasn't worth it to try again. Raiders of the Lost Ark simply isn't that much fun. It's an okay game, but it's not brilliant. Okay, sure, it does have the same sort of maze game adventure style that older titles like Adventure and Haunted House had, but without the sense of randomness those games provided. You have a linear quest littered with out-of-the-way death traps and other things that artificially raise the difficulty. Finding items and figuring out how and where to use them is a kind of a fun challenge. But I have to say, that fun quickly dissipates. And when things conclude with a tricky succeed or die arcade-like challenge, and a room where thieves can instantly steal your dreams of victory, then that's just a cheap conclusion to a bad game with virtually no replay value. Oh, so there you go. But, in saying all that, Steven Spielberg did notice him and he asked him to do a certain project called E.T. But bloody hell, that's another story for another day.
This is Mega Mania by Activision for the Atari 2600, and this is what critics are saying about it. Winner, most humorous home game, 4 stars, relentless action. Mega Mania's enemy objects just won't let up. Hamburgers, cookies, bugs, radial tires, diamonds, steam irons, bow ties, and dice. Faster and faster they come again. It's merciless, demanding, hard, rough, tough, and hairy. Again and again from different directions come hamburgers, cookies, bugs, radial tires, diamonds, steam irons, bow ties, and dice. Insistent, persistent, exacting, taxing. This is no ordinary mania. This is Mega Mania. Another hit by Steve Cartwright for Activision.
Mega Mania is a fixed shooter video game developed by Steve Cartwright for the Atari 2600, and it was published by Activision in 1982. Cartwright initially found inspiration for Mega Mania's gameplay from the arcade game Astro Blaster. After completing a variation of the game, the team at Activision felt it needed a different form to separate itself from various space shooter games on the market, eventually leading to Activision's ad agency developing the food-induced nightmare theme. And the game took 9 months for Cartwright to develop. In Mega Mania, the player is a pilot of a machine referred to as both an intergalactic space cruiser and a mobile blaster. After a day of work, the pilot gorges themselves on food ranging from ice cream to pizzas and begin to hallucinate. And at home after falling asleep, the pilots find themselves in a nightmare being attacked by various food and household objects such as hamburgers, steam irons and bow ties. I mean, Christ, what were they eating? Were they eating the funny mushrooms? And as a result, the player must control their fleet of mobile blasters that they're under attack from these objects. Now, Mega Mania can be played with 1 player or 2 players taking turns. And the goal of Mega Mania is to accumulate points by knocking out as many enemy objects as possible by firing the ship's missile launcher at them before the player's own fleet of 3 space cruisers is destroyed. And the player can earn an extra space cruiser in reserve for every 10,000 points he earns. There are 8 waves of enemies which move with different frequency and attack patterns. Each wave has the point value of each object increased until the 8th wave featuring space dice, after which all enemies are worth 90 points each and the enemy's palette colour and patterns also change. The game is timed by an energy bar at the bottom of the screen that gradually depletes during each wave. And if it runs out, the player loses a blaster. And also, bonus points are rewarded after each round for how much energy is left in each bar. Using the game options on the Atari, the player can choose between guided missiles or straight missiles. Guided missiles can be steered by following your joystick movement, and with straight missiles, they streak straight up. The most original thing about Mega Mania is its strange enemies. As I mentioned, instead of using aliens that dance back and forth like most of the other old space shooters, this one features everyday items that we humans are used to seeing. In the first level, a dense group of hamburgers scroll across the screen as they drop fire at your upright ship that greatly resembles the Starship Enterprise from the classic show Star Trek. Using your endless supply of missiles, you must destroy these delicious foods before your time graph at the bottom of the screen runs dry. And when the time runs out, or you come into contact with an enemy or they're falling fire, you're dead. But as I've already said, all hope's not lost for sharpshooters because every 10,000 points that are collected, it will morph into an extra life. Once you send each and every evil hamburger to its grave, you simply progress to the next set of enemies that fly around in the same pitch black background. Next in line are crackers that fall down and to the left for a few seconds and then down to the right, trying as they may to jam themselves into your ship's throat. That's another thing about Mega Mania that was pretty unique for its time. Not only do the enemies change into several other forms, but they also have different ways of attacking. Colonies of ants and spinning bow ties tend to stay in the top half of the screen, dropping fire at you, while tires and rolling dice are more brave. I mean, there are suicidal bombers that just move horizontally as they also make their way down towards your ship in large groups that nearly fill the screen, making you feel all the more claustrophobic. Though it may not sound like it from this review, Mega Mania isn't a cutesy game at all, it's more on the serious and action-packed side. These enemies really do want to kill you. They're certainly intent on sending you to your resting grounds that when you defeat all of them, the whole thing repeats itself, only this time, these demons will be much tougher. Just wait until you see how much faster those irons, diamonds, etc. become. Many of them even change their ways of attacking, which really adds to the challenge and replay value. I mean, again, for instance, instead of simply scrolling across the screen, the hamburgers now scroll, stop for a few seconds, and then continue their journey. And those flipping crackers, they seem to fall at much steeper angles, along with being quicker, giving you the impression that they're really seeking revenge. Mega Mania is a great space shooter, it really is. It manages to be hilarious until you get used to the idea of destroying everyday items. We're all used to eating hamburgers, using irons to flatten out our clothes and rolling dice in a board game, but who would ever thought that they would turn against us like ruthless traitors? Whether you're laughing or not, the game always proves to be a lot of fun from start to finish. You also know that the game will never end, but that doesn't matter. I mean, it's this simplicity and short-lasting gameplay that's what made the Atari games charming. So why would I not give this a perfect review score? Well, I suppose as original as the premise is, Mega Mania isn't as full of variety as other classic space shooters are. You can always select whether to use normal missiles or just fly straight up and after being unleashed, or for much easier killing sprees, you can opt for the guided missiles. You can also choose from one player game or a two player, taking turns. But that's it really. But in saying all that, there aren't over 100 variations like you'd see in Space Invaders, or excellent variety in the gameplay like you would see in 2600 version of Defender. Controlling the Starship Enterprise look-alike is a cinch, but you'll find that it doesn't move left and right quickly enough to escape the starving grips of certain waves of enemies. That's really nothing major, but it's noticeable enough to point out. The visuals are basic, so they don't really add anything to the game, and of course there's no music. Some of the sound effects are very nice though. When losing a life, your ship slowly disappears while a relevant futuristic sound is heard. And the sound of hitting an enemy, well, that's quite impressive as well, I suppose. But for me, graphics and sounds don't matter much in an Atari 2600 game though, it's just a matter of how playable and fun it is. And for me, Mega Mania is fun. In fact, it's mega fun. The challenge is right on target, and I'd say it's up there with the best space shooters for the system. So I suppose my only pet peeve for the Atari 2600 titles is not having enough variations, and that's the only major thing I don't like about Mega Mania. But never mind all that, because those little nitpicks don't take much at all away from the experience of playing this fun and original space shooter. I mean, the game also received the most humorous home arcade game at the 4th annual Arcade Awards, and in 1984 Video and Computer Gaming Illustrated declared Mega Mania as the best Atari 2600 game. Nice. So I say this to you all, if you're a fan of this genre, then play this, what might be the most underrated game of its type for the Atari 2600. Go on, give it a go.
TV. Check. Cosmic Arc cartridge. Check. Power. Yeah, power.
Cosmic Arc is a game cartridge for the Atari video system.
Meteor! I got it!
The Cosmic Arc searches out strange creatures on distant planets.
Beam them up!
But the deeper the arc travels in space, the tougher it gets.
We may never get back to Earth! Boys, clean your room. We're back.
Cosmic Arc by Imagic. The video system must be bought separately and connected to the TV by your parents.
Okay, right. Cosmic Arc. It was designed by Rob Fulop and published by Imagic in 1982. And piloting the Cosmic Arc, your mission is to rescue creatures before the sun of Alpha Rho fades. Now, there's two distinct gameplay scenes. With the first stage, the player must fend off meteorite showers from all four sides of the screen by pushing the joystick to fire in the desired direction. Very similar to the 1980 arcade game Space App. Now, I have to say the gameplay is seriously intense, and it never allows you to take a moment to relax, resulting in a somewhat stressful experience that always leans on the right side of fun though. And I have to say a big part of this is that the difficulty curve is spot on, and it gently eases you in before unleashing an absolute onslaught of meteorites your way. And also, being a stationary target adds to the anxiety, and I love how the sound of meteors heading your way seems to increase in treble noise as the wave continues. But it's all good fun. The second scene tasks you with exiting the Ark in a space shuttle and rescuing two creatures using its tractor beam. But you do need to be careful, because care must be taken to avoid the defence systems that move up and down and fire at intervals, and a warning sound will alert you if the Ark is in danger of incoming meteorite attacks. It's very much a game of cat and mouse, and the most enjoyable aspect is the constant battle of trying to rescue as many creatures as possible, while giving yourself enough time to protect the Ark from impending doom. The multitasking feature gives the scene a real edge, and the controls respond admirably throughout also. A nice touch is how the creatures change their appearance after the first few waves, which includes separate animations. This provides incentive to keep playing in the hope that other species appear. Also, the scrolling backgrounds that twist and rotate are mighty impressive and perfectly suit the space theme. Now, Cosmic Arc does not provide a set number of lives. Instead, the player's arc starts with 40 fuel units, which are lost with each meteorite strike or fired shot, and gained by destroying a meteor or capturing a life form. And capturing both life forms from a planet before the warning klaxon will top off fuel reserves. If the arc runs out of energy, the next hit it takes will end the game. And very similar to its predecessor Atlantis, Cosmic Arc ends with the destruction of the Ark, but the smaller shuttle ship escaping. And this plot thread, well, it wasn't continued in any other Imagic games. And finally, well, Cosmic Arc is a terrific game, and somewhat of a technical showcase for the console, given its refined graphics and overall presentation. Thankfully, the action is just as impressive, and its solid controls, twitch-based gameplay and multi-screen approach results in an exceptional title that quickly gets your heart rate pumping.
So you created Atlantis for Imagic.
I was at Atlantis. The skies above the underwater city filled with Gorgon attack vessels. 3 sentry posts fought desperately, but they were no match for the Gorgon death rays.
But you're here. I thought the Gorgons destroyed everybody at Atlantis.
We did!
Atlantis by Imagic is for Atari and in television systems.
Atlantis is a fixed shooter video game released by Imagic in August 1982. The game was designed by Dennis Cobble. In comparison to his previous game, Trickshot, which he described as giving him anxiety, Cobble described the development of Atlantis as a far more positive experience. And Atlantis, well, it was a financial success for Imagic, being the second highest grossing game for the company after Demon Attack. Anyway, the game takes place in the fabled city of Atlantis, a place with major city districts. One day, an ominous sound is heard in the sea surrounding the city, and that is the Gorgon fleet, fierce warriors with an intent to demolishing the city. So, the goal of the game is to defend Atlantis from the Gorgon's vessels before they destroy it with their death rays. The player can fire at the invading Gorgon sentry vessels from either the Acropolis command post or the sentry post on each side of the screen. And also those smaller and faster ships, they're worth more points. The Gorgon fleet attacks in waves. At the end of each wave, the player receives points for each part of Atlantis that is not destroyed. For every 10,000 points, a destroyed part of Atlantis is restored at the end of the wave. And points are earned for shooting the vessels. The smaller ships, as I said, are worth more points, and shooting them with the sentries is worth more points too. Each city in the game has a force field that protects it, powered by the Acropolis post. In some game modes, the Acropolis post is disabled. Other game modes include adjusting whether the next wave of enemies have faster enemies, or offer a 2-player mode where the left joystick fires the left and the right joystick control each sentry respectively. Now, with a rudimentary sense of timing, you can easily wipe out the first few waves of ships. You probably won't even need the side cannons. And as you advance, well, the speed certainly picks up. Timing certainly becomes tighter, precision more important too. Let a ship slip by and it will return with a nasty vertical laser, destroying one of your structures. The first to go is usually your central cannon, and from there you're forced to use the side guns. As ships slip by, they'll destroy more pieces of your city until you are forced to flee. Now, I have to say, Atlantis, it gets wicked frantic. Eventually you cannot keep up with the speeds in ships unless you're either a genius or an android specially programmed to rock at timing-based games. Now, there are special ships you can shoot that will wipe out everything on the screen, and I have to say that certainly helps. But even with this said ships, it doesn't take long for the difficulty to escalate, and you'll find most of your sessions don't last much longer than a few minutes. That was certainly my case. The game certainly provides a quick and simple action, and sometimes that's all you really need. However, I did find the game a little simple, with sessions so short that it is difficult to stay focused on it for more than just a few plays. But in saying all that, Atlantis, it does achieve what it set out to do, and I can't really argue with that. The developer certainly knew how to keep things simple, and he did provide us with a decent basic action-packed game, with enough explosions and destruction to keep drilling fools like myself interested. But still, it does feel like there's room for another concept or two, but adding them wouldn't have killed the game's basic feel. Now, Atlantis only has sound effects. Said sound effects are done in Atari's usual over-the-top fashion, especially the static-ridden explosions and death ray zaps. Sure, some music would have gone really well with the overall theme of the title, but soundtracks weren't exactly considered a necessary part of games at the time, going from my experience with Atari games anyway. Now, with regards to the graphics, everything in the game is very colourful to say the least. Both your turrets and enemy ships are rainbow coloured, and there are some pretty spectacular seizure-inducing explosions that occur when you blow up enemies. Aside from that though, everything is represented by the usual blocky Atari graphics, but the developer did do a good job of representing the sunken city, considering what they had to work with, and the game has a certain charm to it as a result. And on a side note, some of those ships look suspiciously like the Enterprise from Star Trek. It's difficult to say whether or not this was intentional, but it is amusing nonetheless. And finally, I would say that gaming was still very much a new medium when Atlantis hit the shelves, and the Atari 2600 could only do so much. With that said, I couldn't help but think the game was maybe a bit too ambitious for its time. Someone playing Atlantis back in 1982 may have thought otherwise, but people who have spent years playing shooters and first-person shooter games that allow them to spray bullets at absurd rates like myself may have trouble getting used to the more, shall we say, measured pace of this title. However, the game is an interesting history lesson.
You're a fly named Yar on a quest in space. You attack the shield of the Kotile's base. But watch out, Yar!
He knows where you are. Yar's revenge is
New from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
With ion zones and evil drones, there's nothing else like Yar's Revenge, the way out space game that's new from Atari. Who else?
Have you played Atari today?
Okay, so here we go, Yar's Revenge. Yar's Revenge is a 1982 fixed shooter video game developed by Howard Scott Warshaw, and it was published by Atari. Initially tasked with developing a port of the arcade game Star Castle, Warshaw developed it first, focusing on graphics and then taking in feedback from his co-workers to develop its gameplay. He was also responsible for the backstory of the game, which was adapted as a comic book that was included with the game. Now, I have to say, Yar's Revenge is one of the Atari 2600's best games, through and through. Howard Scott Warshaw was truly the master of games, even though he only made 4 games. He certainly managed to push the Atari 2600 to astronomical levels, for example, giving a tremendous amount of depth to a game such as Raiders of the Lost Ark, create an entire world in E.T., and have a boss battle in Saboteur. And all of his games, with the exception of Saboteur, have the distinction of selling 1 million cartridges or more. And if those facts didn't convince you, well, the fact is, all his games, with the exception of E.T., have got very positive reviews from the critics. But anyway, enough of this crazy talk, let's have a look at the game. So, Yar's Revenge is part of the subgenre of shooter games called either the fixed or single screen shooter. Yar's Revenge differs from many other similar popular games from that era, such as Space Invaders, Galaxian or Gorf, as it has its gameplay on the main axis of conflict orientated horizontally rather than vertically. Now, the main player, yourself, controls Yar, a fly-like object, which can be moved in any direction on the screen. And the screen, well, it wraps vertically. And the primary goal in Yar's Revenge is to break a path through the energy shield and destroy the quotile with a hit from the Zorlon cannon. Right, who makes up those names? The shield is the object on the right side of the screen, shaped like an arc or a shifting rectangle. It is made up of cells, and to do this, the player can fire energy missiles shot from the Yar, which can destroy the cells in the shield or by directly coming into contact with them, allowing Yar to devour them. Once a clear path to the quotile behind the shield is open, the cannon can be readied by either eating a cell or moving Yar over to the quotile. Now, each player starts with 4 lives. And when Yar is hit by items fired by the quotile, such as a guided missiles called destroyer missiles and the swirling pinwheels called swirls, the player then loses a life. The destroyer missiles are continuously on the screen, while the swirl is something the quotile transforms itself into and can be destroyed by the Zorlon cannon. The cannon appears on the left side of the screen and moves with a direct line with Yar, putting the player in the line of fire. The player must aim at the quotile and dodge out of the way, as having Yar hit by it makes him lose a life. There's also a colourful band down the centre of the playfield, which is the neutral zone. So when the player manoeuvres the Yar within it, they are protected from the destroyer missiles, but you cannot fire your weapons. Now, a secondary task is to gain a high score from earning points in the game. And points are collected by destroying an energy cell, a quotile or a swirl. High scores are indicated by changes in gameplay. The swirl activates more frequently when the player reaches 70,000 and 230,000 points, and the enemy shield changes colours from blue to grey to pink when certain point thresholds are met. There are also several variations of the game that the player can set by adjusting the A and B switches on the console. Variations of the game include have the game adjust the speed of both the destroyer missile and the swirl, the frequency of how often the swirl appears, and a mode called Ultimate Yars. And in this version, well, the Zorlon cannon bounces back shots from the shield if it hits it, and Yar must collect units of energy called Trons to summon the cannon. They are collected by eating a cell, touching the quotile and catching a Zorlon cannon shot after it bounces off the shield. Well, that doesn't sound particularly simple, does it? Now, what do I think of this game? Well, regarding the gameplay, Yars moves fast, but not too fast to make the gameplay frustrating. Yars can also move in 8 directions, which is good because it makes gameplay slightly more at ease. Yars can get killed by his own cannon, the quotile swirl and the bullet. But one thing is, this eventually gets very hard. I mean, very hard. But mind you, not impossible. And it is fair to say that many games lose their appeal for being nigh near impossible. For example, fast food, enjoyable at first but impossible 2 minutes later. And unlike games like Sword Quest, which are very hard to understand, Yar's Revenge barely needs a read of the manual, so that's good. But for me overall, it is incredible how simple but addicting this game is. Howard Scott Warshaw knew how to push the limits of the Atari 2600 like never before, and this game shows it. And with regards to the graphics, well, the graphics are about as good as they get on the Atari 2600. Yars looks like a fly, which is the character he is representing. I have to say, I did like the animations, you know, like Yars flapping his wings, Yars dying, and the swirl spinning and the wall moving around the place. And the quotile looked just like an evil starship. Oh, and the Zorlon cannon and the wall are just brilliantly multicoloured. Pretty good. I suppose my only minor complaint is that there is a very faint but a little annoying flicker. I suppose I didn't like that part, but other than that, everything is perfect. Spot on. And on top of that, the sound effects, well, they are superb. There's a very realistic humming noise and a nice beat to it too. And the Quotile transformation noise into the swirl sounds pretty solid also. And the cannon noise, well, I don't know why the same sound effects can be found in so many games, but it gets the job done. But I have to say that explosion sound effect, really like an 8-bit version of a thunderclap, except with a catchy beat. And finally, the death sound, well, I don't know how Howard managed to create a completely original sound effect under a horrible sound chip, but he did it. Clever fella that Howard, and he also done a good Raiders march and a flying theme in the other two games. Pretty decent, pretty good. So, wow, what a game. From the ingenuity of the game itself, to the absolutely beautiful sound effects, to the visually appealing graphics, to the addicting but fast gameplay, this game is the reason you should appreciate the Atari 2600. For me, it's just so hard to say anything bad about this game. So what can I say? It's one of the best games on the Atari 2600, and maybe all time, who knows?
So you think you're fast enough to beat the bomber? I don't think so.
Kaboom! By Activision. Plug this cartridge into your Atari video game system and get ready to handle high explosives. Don't sneeze. Don't even blink, because the faster you get, the faster he gets.
And if you miss...
Kaboom! By Activision.
Kaboom is an action video game published in 1981 by Activision. The game involves a mad bomber dropping bombs at increasing speeds as the player controls a set of water buckets to catch them. The gameplay, it was based on an Atari arcade video game, Avalanche. And Kaboom, well, it was programmed by Larry Kaplan and David Crane, coding the graphics for the buckets and the mad bomber. It was also the last game designed by Kaplan for Activision, who left the company shortly after it was released. Now, looking at Kaboom, it has all the makings of a lame game. It only has one screen, it has simple graphics and sounds, and yet it is one of the best games ever made for the Atari 2600. If not the best, it's certainly the most addictive because it can be played so quickly and repeatedly without growing old. In Kaboom, a mad bomber drops bombs to watch them explode. The player starts with 3 water-filled buckets and must catch the bombs to defuse them and gain points. The game uses the paddle controller, moving the buckets of water left and right by moving the dial clockwise and counterclockwise. The bombs begin dropping faster as they are collected, and when the player misses a bomb, all other bombs in the screen explode and the player loses 1 bucket. And if at least 1 bucket is missing, then the player receives a new bucket every 1,000 points. The difficulty switches on the console, making it so buckets are just half as wide, making grabbing bombs much more difficult. A 2-player option is also available where the players take turns controlling buckets and have their own individual scores displayed. Now, looking at this game, it is hard to explain how such a rudimentary game can be so much fun. I mean, really, there's nothing to this game other than moving the buckets under the bombs, and yet I love it. It certainly is a shining example of the easy-to-learn and difficult-to-master law of great vintage games. Kaboom is perfect in terms of challenge. The game designers deserve accolades for making the game's difficulty increase at such a reasonable pace. One of the nice features to this cart is that after each stage, the action stops to allow the player to catch their breath, so to speak. Though I have to say, after playing this game for extended periods, and you will because it's so much fun, it's almost annoying to have the break between the rounds. You're so excited that you don't want to stop, but in saying that, sometimes it's nice to give your eyeballs a rest. Now, it's amazing how fast those later stages will become. Now, don't laugh, but I find a good strategy to take is to stare at the screen as you would one of those hidden 3D pictures. Try to give yourself tunnel vision and stare only at the green field of play where the bombs drop and not the bomber. And instead of trying to get directly underneath the bombs, attempt to hit them from the side. When the action approaches ultra hyperspeed, your brain itself will be challenged to see if the input from your eyes to your brain to your hand can process it all fast enough. It's certainly funny how it takes your brain some time to get used to the gameplay of Kaboom, but the more you play, the further you'll advance. It almost has something of a psychological and biological effect on you, because your coordination skills will be challenged, and because the game is so quickly paced, you might even find your heart rate speeding up. I mean, it's the video game equivalent of a cup of espresso. Maybe even two. In regards to the graphics, well, technically the graphics to this game are pretty standard for a 2600 game. Everything has a cartoony look, giving the game a light-hearted feeling. It's appealing to all ages and doesn't feel intimidating, rather quite inviting. The use of a medium shade of green as the background colour was a wise choice, as it's easy on the eyes. And had this game been in black and white, or any of those hideous pastel colour combinations that the early 2600 games had, then this wouldn't have worked so well. Now, with regards to the sounds, well, Kaboom doesn't really have much in terms of sound, but the sounds it does employ are quite complementary. The splash sound every time you catch a bomb is cute, as in the kaboom sounds made when the bombs explode. Of course, the most notable sonic feature here is the fact that the pitch of the splashing sound increases every round. Not only does the gameplay speed up, but increasing the pitch adds to the tension perfectly. By the time you reach 3000 points, your head will be ready to explode, and I mean that in a good way. Now, for me, half the appeal to Kaboom lies in its replay value. This is such a simple, easy to learn game that you'll find quite addictive. The only problem is starting over again at such a slow pace after having just played at such a fast rate. Still, I can't think of many games for the Atari 2600 that are as difficult to walk away from as this one. The only thing I could criticise this cart for would be that there are no difficulty settings built into the game, other than selecting the size of your buckets with the difficulty switch on the console itself. So overall, in summary, I think the brilliance to this game lies in its simple but challenging gameplay and its high replay value. So, good job Activision, well done. And finally, Kaboom sold $6.3 million for Activision in 1981 and $66 million in 1982. And the game, it sold over 1 million copies by 1984.
Okay, ladies, game time. Yeah! Got this new video game by Activision called Freeway. I just plug it into my Atari video game system and really impress the ladies. Of course, with Freeway, you gotta be real good to race your chicken across 10 lanes of heavy traffic. You gotta dodge speeding cars, roaring trucks. Sometimes you make it without getting your feathers ruffled. Sometimes... Ladies, I'm only human. Freeway by Activision.
Freeway is an action video game written by David Crane for the Atari 2600 and published by Activision in 1981. Now, interestingly, Crane has given a few variations of a story that gave inspiration for Freeway. One variation, published in 1981, involved Crane and his friends attempting to cross Chicago's busiest thoroughfare after exiting the wrong end of a building. And when attempting to cross, one of his friends joked that this would make a great video game. Another variation is game designer Larry Kaplan would later be riding a bus and witness someone attempting to cross Lakeshore Drive. And apparently Kaplan would discuss the incident to Crane, who cemented the idea of developing it into a video game. And then later in an interview with Retro Gamer, published in 2011, Crane apparently had a variation of the story that the game came from an experience at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. Crane said he spotted someone parking a mile from the convention centre who scaled a fence and dodged several lanes of traffic on Lakeshore Drive, including a bus that Crane was riding in. So, Christ, who knows? Who knows what the real facts are? But anyway, Crane began developing the game shortly after based on the gameplay of the arcade game Space Race. And Crane's game initially had two men competing to move from the bottom of the screen to the top as many times as possible in just 2 minutes. And then 3 days before the next CES show, Activision CEO Jim Levy suggested to change the characters in the game into a chicken, as he could market it with someone wearing a chicken suit at the convention centre, and it would fit a theme of why did the chicken cross the road. Now, I have to say, Freeway is often compared to the arcade game Frogger. And when asked which idea was developed first, Kane responded, the simple answer is neither. These two games were developed in secure laboratories 6,000 miles apart right around the same time. Anyway, enough of that. Let's have a look at the game, shall we? So, Freeway is an action game. And in the game, the player guides a chicken across 10 lanes of a freeway while avoiding traffic. It can be played in single player or two players simultaneously, with each person controlling a chicken. And each player can control their chicken moving up and down the screen. However, you can't move the birds left or right or even make them jump. You just start at the bottom of the screen and try to make it to the other side of the road, to the top of the screen. And each time the player moves their chicken across the freeway, they are awarded 1 point. And each game lasts about 2 minutes and 16 seconds, and the player with the highest score is the ultimate winner. Also, before beginning a game, you can press the select over and over on the Atari 2600 console, which enables you to cycle through the various levels that are available to play. In all of the stages, there will be two chickens at the bottom of the screen, and the same basic looking road with its overhead view always resides on the screen. The only thing that doesn't change about any of the levels are the lineups of vehicles that are crossing the road. For instance, in the first level there are mostly cars and the majority of them are moving fairly slowly. And as you cycle through the stages, you'll see other variations, such as one that is nothing but trucks, and many that are a mixture of both trucks and cars. And the number of vehicles on the screen also changes. In the first stage, almost all the vehicles are travelling solo, but in other stages, cars can travel in closely knit packs of 3, on top of there being almost twice as many of the automobiles. While you play the game, no matter what level you're on, you will notice that some of the cars and trucks move across the screen at a constant speed the entire time. However, on the other hand, many of them, especially the small cars, change speeds during the game. 1 minute they speed across the screen like a car that just drank an 18-wheeler full of caffeine, and the next minute they might be moving so slowly that you would think they're driving Miss Daisy. Oh, you probably don't know that film. Anyway, it's an old film that starred Morgan Freeman, and it was a good film, and it probably set Morgan Freeman on his path to success. And if Freeway is too easy for your liking, then you can always change the difficulty with the switch on the back of the console. And if you do that, instead of the chicken just getting thrown back a few feet when it gets hit, it will have to start all over again from the beginning after it comes in contact with any of these metal monsters. Now, with regards to the game, I've never really seen a Freeway that I would call good looking, but Freeway, the game, is probably the best looking one I've ever seen. All the cars and trucks are very detailed for the Atari 2600 standard. The chickens in the roads appear basic but are well done. And those chickens are especially nice with their animation. As it's running up or down the road, its head moves back and forth as if it was picking up worms on the ground. And when a yellow as egg yolk chicken gets hit by a car, it falls down in a convincing way with its wings spread out. Along with the nice detail of everything and the animation of the chickens, Freeway is also pretty colourful, making it look more appealing. Although, I have to say, unfortunately, there is not any music at all in the game. The entire time that you're playing the game, there is a constant murmur of horns and the sound of vehicles speeding by in the background. Although, in my opinion, these sounds that come into place of the absent music are extremely nice, and I have to say they're very realistic. Other sound effects, such as when the chicken gets hit by a car and when you make it to the other side of the road, are also memorable. Freeway probably sounds like it would be as boring as sitting in a class listening to one of your least favourite teachers reminisce about his or her life, since all you do is try and guide a chicken across the road, but it's actually a lot of fun and even a little bit humorous the first few plays. It's especially fun to play against somebody you really like playing video games with and laughing at each other when one of you gets hit. But I have to say, Freeway does have its own set of cons. It's fun to play by yourself if you're bored, or if you simply want to challenge yourself by seeing if you can get a certain number of points, but yeah, there's always a but. For me, Freeway would have been a better game if it had a computer opponent that solo players could go up against. So I was a little bit disappointed that Activision didn't put that in the game. Some people may also complain about how you can't move in any directions other than up and down. Me personally, I think it's just part of the challenge. If you can move in any direction, I think Freeway would be just a little bit too easy. So in summary, well, there's nothing particularly innovative about Freeway. It's just a good old-fashioned video game that perhaps could be considered an original idea for that game if it wasn't for it being so similar to that ages-old joke. So, why did the chicken cross the road? Well, if you look to the game of Freeway for the answer, then I guess it would be the most basic answer that has ever been proposed. You know, to get to the other side. But as many different answers, both goofy and intelligent alike, that I've heard throughout the years, I believe it's just one of those questions that we'll never know the true answer to.
Well, that space game there looks like a thrill a minute. Why not try a real blast? Laser Blast by Activision, a new breed of game cartridge for your Atari video computer system. Battle endless attackers, fight their force fields, and dodge their radar tracking systems. It's light years away from all those other space games.
What other space games?
Laser Blast by Activision.
Alright, number 17, Laser Blast, which is a single-player video game developed and published by Activision in March 1981. And this game, well, it was designed by David Crane. The objective of Laser Blast is to destroy a series of land-based enemies. The player controls a fleet of flying saucers operating one at a time. On the planet's surface below is a group of 3 mobile laser bases, guarded by an invisible force field that prevents the player's saucer from getting too close to the surface. And both the player and the enemy bases are armed with laser blasters, which may fire a single continuous beam at a time. If the player's saucer is hit, it will lose altitude and crash to the ground, but the player may direct this fall potentially into one of those bases, destroying it as well. Each succeeding wave of enemy bases moves faster and targets the player's saucers more quickly, while the force field becomes stronger and decreases the amount of space in which the saucer can move. Players score points for each base destroyed, with points multiplying each wave up to a maximum of 90 points per base. Players earn extra flying saucers with every 1,000 points scored and may keep a maximum of 6 extra saucers in reserve. And apparently, players who scored 100,000 points or more could submit photographic proof to Activision and be admitted to the Activision Federation of Laser Blasters. Nice. Now, I have to say, Laser Blast has some nice features, but there really isn't much variety in its gameplay. It's pretty much a dodge and fire action shooter. For me, the graphics are not quite up to the standards that David Crane set in later efforts, and the same can be said about the sound effects too. But in saying all that, nevertheless, Laser Blast is a simple and addictive game and nowhere near as bad as some make it out to be. Okay, sure, it's far from the best game out there, but when you consider when it was released, well, it's pretty good. Right, number 16 is Adventure, and this game is a 1980 action-adventure game developed by Warren Robinett. In Adventure, the player's goal is to recover the enchanted chalice, which an evil magician has stolen and hidden in the kingdom, and you need to return it to the Golden Castle. The kingdom is made of a total of 30 rooms, with various obstacles, enemies and mazes located in and around the golden, white and black castles. Now, the kingdom is guarded by 3 dragons, the yellow Yorgle, the green Grundle and the red Rindle, that protect or flee from various items and attack the player's avatar. There's also a hostile bat which can roam the kingdom freely, carrying an item or a dragon around. The bat was named Nubberrub, but the name is not in the manual. Strange name, isn't it? Now, the bat has 2 states, which are agitation and non-agitation. Now, when in the agitated state, the bat will either pick up or swap what it currently carries with an object in the present room, eventually return to the non-agitated state when it will not pick up an object. And the flipping bat, well, it continues to fly around, swapping objects even when it's off screen. The player's avatar is a square that can move within and between rooms. Each room is represented by a single screen. Helpful objects include keys that open the castles and magnet that pulls items towards the player, a magic bridge that the player can use to cross certain obstacles, and a sword which can be used to defeat the dragons. And the player can only carry 1 object at a time. And if eaten by a dragon, well, the player can then opt to resurrect the dead avatar instead of completely restarting the game. The avatar appears at the Golden Castle and all the objects remain at their latest location, but all slain dragons are resurrected. Not so good. And this ability to resurrect the avatar without resetting the entire game is one of the earliest examples of a continue game option in a video game. The game offers 3 different skill levels. Level 1 is the easiest as it uses a simplified room layout and does not include the White Castle, Bat, Red Dragon or Invisible Mazes. However, Level 2 is the full version of the game with various objects appearing in set positions at the start. Then there's Level 3, which is similar to Level 2, but the location of the objects is randomised for greater challenge. And you can also use the difficulty switches on the Atari 2600 to further control the game's difficulty. One switch controls the dragon's bite speed and one causes them to flee when the player carries the sword. Now, there is one very interesting fact I want to share with you about this game. Apparently, there was a lot of conflict with Atari's management team which denied giving public credit for programmers. And guess what? Well, Robinett was not happy with this, so he programmed a secret room within the game that contained his name, and this room was only found by players after the game was shipped and after Robinett had left Atari. Okay, well, not the first such Easter egg, but Robinett's secret room pioneered the idea within video games and other forms of media and has since become part of popular culture. And you might remember it was in Ernest Cline's 2011 novel, Ready Player One. You know, the film, the 2018 film adaptation that had that secret room in the game. And I think that film was done by Steven Spielberg. Good film, I enjoyed it. Now, Adventure received positive reviews at the time of its release and in the decade since. It is often named as one of the industry's most influential games and among the greatest video games of all time. It is one of the first action-adventure and fantasy games and inspired other games in the genre. More than 1 million cartridges of Adventure were sold, and the game has been included in numerous Atari 2600 game collections for modern computer hardware. And the game's prototype code was used as the basis for the 1979 Superman game, and a planned sequel eventually formed the basis for the Sword Quest games too. So, in summary, Adventure was the first action-adventure game on a video console, the first to contain a widely known Easter egg, and the first to allow a player to have a stash of items, which required the player to select which one to use at any given moment, usually through keyboard or joystick input. Adventure allowed the player to drop one item and pick up another without having to type in any commands. The graphics, on the other hand, well, they weren't that great. And adventure creator Warren Robinett even described the dragons as looking like ducks.
Way down deep inside of every man, there's a little boy, an Atari fan, and without any doubt, the boy will come out when he plays a game from Atari. Have you played Atari today?
Give a man an Atari game and he'll turn into a little boy. But don't worry, he'll be grown up enough to share it.
Have you played Atari today?
Alright, number 15 is Breakout. Now, Breakout is an arcade video game developed and published by Atari and released on May the 13th. Now, I have to say, this game was designed by absolute geniuses. You know, Nolan Bushnell, Steve Bristow, a guy called Steve Wozniak. I don't know if he's talented or not, but by goodness, it was assisted by Steve Jobs. You know, Apple man, Steve Jobs. Anyway, the software version of Breakout was written for the Atari 2600 by Brad Stewart. I'm sure he's talented too. And the game was published in 1978, but with only 6 rows of bricks, and the player is given 5 turns to clear 2 walls instead of 3. In the game, a layer of bricks lines the top third of the screen. A ball travels across the screen, bouncing off the top and side walls of the screen. When a brick is hit, the ball bounces away and the brick is destroyed. The player loses a turn when the ball touches the bottom of the screen, and to prevent this from happening, the player has a movable paddle to bounce the ball upward, keeping it in play. Really not much else to say about the game. I think everybody knows this game, and it was good fun. I did enjoy it as a kid. Okay, Warlords number 14, which is a 1981 action video game developed and published by Atari for the arcades. And the game resembles a combination of Atari's earlier games Breakout and Quadropong. And the Atari 26,000 version of the game was released in 1981 and was written by Karla Minensky. So, Warlords is a battle between 4 warlords, 1 to 4 of which can be controlled by the players. And the objective is to destroy the 3 other castles while protecting one's own castle with a moving shield. Each castle is an L-shaped wall distinguished by a different colour, each containing and protecting a warlord icon. And on the upright version, multiple players must cooperate as a team. The weapons for accomplishing this are spinning fireballs which bounce off anything they touch and destroy chunks of a castle while on contact. Fireballs can be caught, held and thrown by shields for greater hitting force via a power stone button, but at the cost of slowly deteriorating the player's own walls. When an icon is destroyed, it releases another fireball onto the playfield, travelling in the opposite direction of the killing shot. The first fireball is launched by a dragon, always at a human player. Subsequent fireballs, up to a maximum of 4 at once, appear after timeouts or when a warlord icon is destroyed. The last player with their icon intact is awarded a point bonus. And the game ends when all human players are eliminated. Now, I suppose this game is really nothing more than a mix between Breakout and 4-Way Pong, done in day-glow colours, but it did conjure up images of kings defending their lands against violent interlopers. It's not a bad game.
The centipedes are coming. Get your fingers moving fast, and the spider's out to get you. Do you think that you can last? You can shoot him in the middle. He will only break in 2. And the fleas are even faster if you look away you're through. See the scorpion a dancing? He can really help you score. But the centipede's immortal, keeps coming back for more. Centipede is from Atari and is faster than a jet. If you're looking for some action, it's the game you gotta get. Centipede.
Reach for Atari.
Alright, number 13, and this is a game that brings back so much nostalgia for me, and that game is Centipede. Now, in Centipede, you control a wand at the bottom of the screen and attempt to shoot and destroy as many filthy bugs as you can. Your main nemesis is a long and winding centipede that invades each level. Therefore, you must exterminate each little segment of the centipede in every level in order to proceed to the next one. Like all the enemies, the centipedes can be either fast or slow depending on the level you're currently playing. But you need to watch out and don't ever let the centipede get to the very bottom of the screen, because if you do, separate segments will start regenerating and coming from either side of the screen. Now, since the name of the game is Centipede, you would think that the actual centipedes would be the most important thing in the game by a long shot. They are, but mushrooms are right up there with them. Scattered all over the screen is clusters of mushrooms, or, in this remake's case, they're squares. 2 or 3 shots from your wand will destroy any of the mushrooms without even leaving a slice of them to put on a pizza. When a centipede or one of its segments touches a mushroom, it will drop down a level and continue its horizontal and downward journey. This can make for some nice strategies or disadvantages. You could choose to leave a couple of vertical rows of mushrooms in place, making the centipede run straight down once it reaches that point. In that case, you could destroy an entire centipede and all its hundreds of legs in about 5 seconds, even though it doesn't appear to have any legs. Now, the centipedes can't do the job all on their own. There are also a few other enemies that you need to keep your eye out for. Or, in this case, keep your wand out for. All through the game, spiders pop out from either side of the screen at the bottom close to where you are. These arachnids jump up and down while making their way to the other side. They also take out mushrooms that they touch with their overly poisonous bodies. Also, a flea will fall from the top of the screen to the bottom if you destroy so many of the mushrooms in an area. And these fleas produce new mushrooms for the screen as they fall. Plus, if you shoot and destroy a flea, another one will appear right away. You will probably have to allow at least one of them to fall all the way down if you get tired of hearing that plummeting noise. Finally, the enemy that earns you the biggest number of points when you send it to its grave is this scorpion. Scorpions scroll from one side of the screen to the other and poison all the mushrooms that they come in contact with on their way. And you'll know when a mushroom is poisoned because it turns whiter than vanilla. And it would be best to get rid of the poison mushrooms as quickly as you can, because if any part of the centipede touches one of them, it will immediately fall straight down the screen until it reaches the bottom. Most of the game's graphics, such as the spiders, centipedes, fleas, etc., look just like they do in the original. The only differences are that the graphics in the arcade game are more colourful, and instead of actual mushrooms like you see in the arcade blockbuster, or even on the title screen of this game, the mushrooms in the Atari 26 version are just flat squares. Apart from the mushrooms, Centipede's graphics are very good, and when you first see the title screen, your mouth will probably drop in awe once you remember that it is for the 2600. And also, some things are better left unchanged. Centipede's sounds are one of these things. The sapping sound of the projecting lasers that you shoot, the mysterious sound the spiders make while flapping around, and the haunting plummeting effect of the fleas, etc., all sound just like they did in the arcade game, and I have to say, that's great. You can always tell when a certain breed of enemy is somewhere around by the sound of their very own unique effect. There's also a constant background beat that really adds to the fast-paced suspense and action. Each sound is clear, well done, and they go great with the atmosphere of the gameplay. The control is the only bad thing whatsoever about the arcade game because you have to use a trackball instead of a joystick. However, since this is the Atari 2600 version of Centipede, you get to use the controllable joystick, and that is a huge plus. The controls are responsive and simple to master. All you have to do is move the joystick in the direction you want to move and press the button anytime you want to shoot. If you need to shoot as fast as possible, you can simply keep hold of the button to fire away non-stop. Simple controls, I like it. So, when comparing the arcade version of Centipede to the Atari 2600 rendition of the same game, it's easy to see that they are almost identical. The gameplay is the same and so is the sound. The asset that truly sets them apart is the controls. Okay, maybe you're one of the precious few that can make the character move around just like you want to by using the trackball, but I have to say, I was never one of those people. I suppose I've been severely spoilt by the joystick. The graphics are a bit less satisfying in the 2600 translation, but the fun factor and replay value are both here in full swing. Overall, I'm a big fan of this game, and I have to say I spent many hours playing the Atari 2600 version of Centipede. It brings back so much nostalgia.
You wanna play Berzerk? You're on. Hey, where you going? The video arcade! You can't play Berzerk at home. Yeah, you can. Atari!
It's Berzerk inside an electric maze, where robots shoot with electric rays.
Take that, turkey!
So look out, don't get trapped, or you might get zapped. Berzerk is here from Atari.
Can you beat that?
And only for systems from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
Number 12, Berzerk. Berzerk was released for the Atari 2600 in August 1982 and it was developed by Dan Hitchens. The lack of the voice aside, the Atari 2600 port of Berzerk is about as faithful of the coin-op translation as you're going to get. It's that good. Just about everything has remained intact in its move from the arcade to the television screen. Berzerk is basically a kill or be killed shooting game that takes place within a maze. It also spawned a large number of clones, influenced everything from Robotron to Smash TV to Loaded to Machine Hunter. The enemy robots in Berzerk start off quite dumb, but as the game progresses they begin to move swiftly and even fire back at you. Now, there are 2 exits in each screen and you are permitted to prematurely exit without killing every enemy, but at the cost of bonus points. Take too long to clear or exit the screen and the infamous Evo Auto appears. That's a clear indication that you had better get the heck out of there. Overall, Atari did one of its best arcade to home ports with Berzerk, and it's definitely worth a look, even if it's just for a history lesson.
Atari's exciting Night Driver was tested by Grand Prix champion Mario Andretti.
This game really cracks me up.
Night Driver from Atari.
Number 11, Night Driver. And this arcade game was released to the Atari 2600 in June 1980 by programmer Rob Fulop, who added colour, displaying the player vehicle, additional vehicles the player must avoid, and showing houses and trees along the sides of the road. Night Driver is an action racing game which takes place at night. Your goal is to score as many points as possible by racing through one of 4 different tracks. Points are scored by passing checkpoints located throughout the track. If your car crashes into the side of the road or oncoming cars or any other obstacles, then you'll lose all your speed and a lot of time. And the game ends when the 90-second time limit is up also. The 4 tracks you can choose from are Beginner, Pro, Expert and Random. Several game options are included, which allows you to select whether or not other cars will honk before entering the screen and choose between a 90-second or infinite amount of time for a game. And as I remember in this game, you have to use the paddle controller which steers the vehicle and holding the button accelerates, but it's not possible to shift gears in this version. Personally, it's not my favourite game, but I have to say it sold almost 2 million copies, so it was a big success.
Which of you Imagic experts has created the toughest game for Atari's video system?
Demon attack! Tough!
Who will there, Fire Breath?
You not good enough for demon demon attack.
Watch out for that demon.
You in big trouble. I win.
Good work, Voltar. Demon attack really is tough.
More money.
Imagic's demon attack.
Tough.
Right, things are getting a bit interesting now. Here's the top 10, and at number 10, it's Demon Attack. Demon Attack is a fixed shooter video game created by Rob Fulop. God, this guy gets around. And it was published by Imagic in 1982. Now, Demon Attack is set on the surface of a planet when strange winged creatures float above, threatening the player. The attack leading the player to retaliate by shooting at them with a laser cannon. I suppose you could describe this game as a bit of a fixed shooter. The player starts with 3 lives called bunkers in the game, which are displayed at the bottom of the screen. Each time the players are hit by enemy fire, they lose a bunker, and the game ends when all the bunkers are depleted. The waves of enemies grow more complex as the game progresses, with wave 5 having the enemies divide into 2 smaller enemies after being shot. And later waves have enemies that will dive towards the laser cannon. The players can move left and right at the bottom of the screen to avoid those enemies. The game offers different modes of play, including a tracer shot mode which allows the player to guide lasers after they are shot. And 2-player games can either be played competitively against each other or as a co-op mode. And in the co-op mode, the 2 players alternate every 4 seconds on who controls moving and firing the ship's laser. In competitive mode, each player controls their laser cannon simultaneously with their own score and bunker count. If one player loses all their bunkers, the other player continues until their bunkers are also lost. Now, this game was very successful. It sold over 2 million copies, and by the end of 1982, the Atari 26 version of Demon Attack was the 3rd highest selling console game of the year, only be beaten by Pitfall and Pac-Man. And we'll certainly be getting onto those 2 games later.
Joey, what's she really like?
She's the most exciting woman I ever met.
Yeah?
Atari introduces the Woman of the Year, Ms. Pac-Man. Just like the arcade classic, 4 different game screens, floating fruit, even pretzels.
Honey, don't you know I'm more than Pac-Man with a bow?
Reach for Ms. Pac-Man.
Reach for Atari.
Okay, number 9, Miss Pac-Man. Now, when you think about it, Atari 2600's Miss Pac-Man didn't really have a whole lot going for it. Considering the logic many people hold, it should have been a complete failure. It was an early 80s console port of an arcade game, Strike 1. It was a sequel, Strike 2. And its console predecessor is Infamous, usually considered one of the worst ports and biggest video game disappointments in history. So that's Strike 3. However, that was not the case with this game. It sold well over 2.3 million copies. Regardless of how awesome Miss Pac-Man is though, it's still not a substitute for the arcade version. Fair enough, we expected that. It doesn't have the amusing cutscenes or the charming music. It doesn't feature the same lovable sound effects or simple yet gorgeous visuals. It does, however, look very similar to its source, as close as an Atari 2600 game can look to its arcade version. And for me, that alone is an impressive feat for an older game. The game's copycatting isn't limited to visuals. Wandering the maze, munching dot hyphens and dodging ghosts remains the same as always. Half the fun of Miss Pac-Man is taking risks. A bouncing fruit that packs a goodish amount of bonus points bounces towards you. You'll rush in to eat it, but notice there's a ghost approaching the fruit as well. So, do you run like a coward or dive in like a daredevil? These close shaves keep the game exciting and are the heart and soul of any good Pac-Man game, that and learning the ins and outs of the maze and using its many features to your advantage. And just when you thought you mastered the labyrinth, well, the screen changes on you. Every other level presents you with a new maze to master, each with its own little traps and tricky corners to help accentuate the risk-taking aspects. The ones that always got me were the long straightaways. I'd remind myself to be aware of the ghost, but as the careless arcade gamer, I'm not afraid of a little peril. Although, I have to say that didn't stop me from swearing when two ghosts pincered me into the straightway. It felt like a scene out of a horror film. So for me, it's certainly more fun to take those risks. There are times though when you don't want an aneurysm while playing. So Atari's 2600 select button comes handy at such times, allowing you to adjust the number of ghost presence on the field. For a simple and more relaxing game, you can deal with just one or two enemies. And you know, even with just a few ghosts, the game can still get a bit hairy. And you also have to be aware because these ghosts, they do become faster and more aggressive as you advance also in the game. They may not give chase as much in the earlier stages, but later on they will tail you like a paranoid constable. It's in those levels that the game is at its sweetest. As you hone your skills, you'll find situations growing more desperate and thrilling. Each key factor, mechanics, rules, progressively climbing difficulty, spot on collision detection, it all comes together to make a simple, fast-paced and very addictive title. So for me, this version of the game is just as good as the arcade version. Okay, sure, maybe it doesn't exude the charm as Big Sister does, but it replicates its arcade counterpart far better than a vast portion of the 2600 library. It's as though Atari knew they had biffed on their predecessor and worked hard to regain the public's trust. And if Miss Pac-Man is an act of atonement, then I say Atari is forgiven.
Hello? Somebody out there? E.T.? Video game?
E.T. is the Atari video game cartridge you have to buy separately to play on the Atari video computer system. Your parents hook it up to the TV. It's the video game that lets you help E.T. get home.
Bye, E.T.
This is the Atari video computer system. E.T. and other video game cartridges are each sold separately.
Oh, here we go, for crying out loud, is E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, the worst game on the planet apparently. In this game, well, it was designed by Howard Scott Warshaw in 1982, a talented guy I have to say, so it's not really his fault about this game because he only had 5 weeks to make it. And as I said, this game is often cited as one of the worst of all time and one of the biggest commercial failures in video game history. It is cited as a major contributing factor to the video game crash of 1983 and has been frequently referenced and mocked in popular culture as a cautionary tale about the dangers of rushed game development and studio interference. And in what was once deemed only an urban legend, reports from 1983 stated that as a result of overproduction and returns, unsold cartridges were secretly buried in a landfill in a desert in New Mexico and covered with a layer of concrete. And in April 2014, diggers hired to investigate the claim confirmed that the landfill contained several ET cartridges, among other games. And apparently, James Heller, the former Atari manager who was in charge of the burial, was at the excavation site and admitted to the Associated Press that 728,000 cartridges of various games, not just ET, were buried there. Anyway, let's have a look at this game and let's see, is it really that bad? Is it the worst game out there? Let's have a look. So, E.T. is an adventure game in which players control the alien E.T. from a top-down perspective. The objective is to collect 3 pieces of an interplanetary telephone. The pieces are found scattered randomly throughout various pits, also referred to as wells. There is no overall time limit, and the player is provided with an on-screen energy bar which decreases when ET performs any actions, and this includes moving, teleporting or falling into a pit, as well as alleviating back at the top. To prevent this, E.T. can collect Reese's Pieces, which are used to restore his energy, or when 9 are collected, E.T. can call Elliot to obtain a piece of the telephone, or the player can save the candy pieces for bonus points at the end. After the 3 phone pieces have been collected, the player must guide E.T. to an area where he can use the phone, which allows him to call his home planet. Once the call is made, a clock appears at the top right of the screen. E.T. has to arrive at the landing zone before it reaches 0. Once E.T. gets to the forest where his ship's abandoned him and stands and waits in this designated area for the ship to come, the ship will appear on screen and take him back to his home planet. See, just like the film. Then the game starts all over with the same difficulty level while changing the location of the telephone pieces. And the score obtained during the round, well, that's carried over to the next iteration. Now, E.T. has 3 lives, and if he dies within those 3 lives, Elliot will come in and revive him. Now, E.T. can get a 4th life if the player finds a uranium in one of the wells. According to the manual, a game can end when E.T. runs out of energy, or when you decide to quit playing. The game is divided into 6 environments, each representing a different setting from the film. To accomplish the objective, the player must guide E.T. into the wells. Once all items found in a well are collected, the player must alleviate E.T. out of them. An icon at the top of each screen represents the current area, each area enabling the player to perform different actions. Antagonists include a scientist who takes E.T. for observation, and there's also an FBI agent who chases the alien to confiscate one of the collected telephone pieces or the candy. The game offers diverse difficulty settings that affect the number and speed of humans present and the conditions needed to accomplish the objective. So, in summary, E.T. will certainly be remembered as the scapegoat for Atari's tragic demise. But for me, there were far, far worse games. Just try Karate or Inca Gold. I mean, those games make E.T. look like a masterpiece. So, before you call out E.T., have a go at those games. And if you do, well, I promise you this, you'll start crying for E.T. Begging for it, in fact. So, leave E.T. alone. It is a shite game, but it's not the worst.
The Defender sees lots of alien ships. The Defender sees lots of radar blips. Every blip is a ship.
Watch this, I got this, Captain.
On a body snatching trip. And it's up to Defender to save them. Defender, a great Atari game.
Have you played Defender? It's the newest of the smash hit home video games that just keep coming. Only from Atari.
You're better than me.
Have you played Atari today?
Right, number 7, a much better game and certainly one of my favourites as a kid, and that game is Defender. For me, there's not many space shooters that are as classic as this game. Just like the title of the game, your job is to defend all the humanoids in a large city against the wrath of invading alien spacecraft from who knows where. Defender isn't anything like the other classic space shooters such as Space Invaders, Galaga, Galaxian or Asteroids. It's more complicated and you have to do more things, including constantly stay on the move. It's your duty to control an ancient looking spaceship that always hovers above the city below. You can glide east or west in your search for enemy spacecrafts in which you must rid of them as if they were a bad habit. Defender isn't a 3D game, it's a 2D game, and as you travel either left or right into eternity, the screen scrolls along with you. The game is set in a sort of boxed in area, but you can glide your ship up into the solid looking barrier and down into the city that consists of several buildings, with a few people scattered here and there too. There are a few different kinds of enemies in Defender that you must watch out for. There are some that look like big asterisks, many resemble square-shaped probes and always move in an upward fashion, and your biggest enemy of all are the ships that look like a Darth Vader head. And all of these enemies have different ways of moving around and attacking. The Asteroids split up into one or two pairs of eyes when you zap their original form. These Asteroids can fire deadly bullets at your aircraft, and they usually move towards your ship and try to tag you to make you it. Each level has one square-shaped probe that just moves from the bottom of the screen to the top, all the time minding its own business, while it leaves a couple of dots under itself in a consistent pattern. Finally, the spaceships that resemble Darth Vader heads can shoot at you more aggressively than the two enemies I just mentioned. These Star Wars character wannabes usually just move around the screen in a slow pattern to the left or right, but like Darth Vader, they have a dark side to them. They can do something that makes them your worst enemy and also the most fun nemesis. They can kidnap the people in the city that you're defending. That's right, I said kidnap. If you ever see one of these enemies moving straight down, then you know it's about to try and make the ever so small population of the city decrease by 1. And when a human is stolen from the ground below, you will always hear a recognisable sound. Also, at all times during the game of Defender, there is a radar at the top middle part of the screen that shows everything you need to keep a watch over. There are dots at the bottom of the radar representing the people, and all the dots that aren't staying still at the bottom of the radar are your enemies. If any of the extraterrestrial ships ever steal any of the citizens, you will see a dot with a dot right under it on the radar. When one of the alien spacecraft steals one of your people, it will have the person or dot attached to the bottom of it. Once the kidnap is in session, the enemy spacecraft will move straight up with the person attached to it until it reaches the top of the screen. And if it gets to the top of the screen with the person, then that human will be gone from your city forever. Also, that Darth Vader hat won't be Darth Vader anymore. It will change into a much faster and terrifyingly aggressive red mutant-like ship that will then turn all its sights toward playing bumper ships with your aircraft. Luckily, since you are the cherished defender, you have a way to rescue the people even after they've been kidnapped. When you come up on one of the Darth Vaders who have a human being attached to them, just shoot the enemy and then move and touch the fallen person that looks like a square dot before they hit the ground. You know, the city. If you do it right, the person will be attached to the bottom of your ship. Then just move down until your ship touches the city, which will produce a memorable sound that lets you know you just did a great job of rescuing a fellow human being. Other than rescuing the people, the objective of Defender is just to shoot and destroy all your technologically advanced enemies from the galaxies beyond. Once you shoot and destroy every foe in a level, a number represents the level you just completed will appear on the screen, and then it's off to the next level. The levels in Defender don't change, but they do get much more difficult as your game progresses. As you get further and further, the enemies will become so fast that lightning might even become jealous of their flashy speed. Don't get me wrong though, Defender is not a game that's too hard to enjoy. Just as long as you use your radar and have a good aim, you should do great. If you get shot just once by any of your enemies, or if you collide with any nemesis, you will lose a life. If the screen ever gets too hectic with so many enemies you feel yourself drowning in claustrophobia, then there is a sort of bomb item that you can use that will instantly destroy all the enemies that are currently on the screen. A kind of a smart bomb. You can always keep track on how many lives you have left, how many bombs you have and your score, because they're all represented at the bottom of the screen. Of course, if you lose all of your lives, your game will be over. If all the people in the level get successfully kidnapped, the screen will flash like hyperactive lightning, and then you will be transported to a land that has only a certain kind of enemy that has no city. Now that is something that I call classic. Now, Defender's graphics don't need anybody to defend them. I mean, for a video game made in 1981, the graphics are great to look at. Most of the enemies, especially the red mutants, are well drawn. And everything else, such as the buildings in the radar, well, they don't look spectacular, but they do go great with the game. And if you ask me, they look very impressive. The game also has some great effects. The way the screen hectically flashes when the humanoids become extinct, and the way your spaceship breaks apart into several tiny fragments are just great. With regards to the sound, well, this is another thing about Defender that can take up for itself. Sure, there's not any music in the game, but a game like this doesn't need any. All the sound effects from when you rescue a person to when you lose a life are all classic and very well done. It's easy to control this game without any hassles whatsoever. All you have to do is move in the direction you want to move and press the button on the joystick anytime you want to unleash your powerful laser or that smart bomb, and controls are responsive and completely free of flaws. Other than Asteroids, I would say I've probably played Defender more than any other space shooter that I own for any system. And Defender, well, it can be played 1 or 2 players, and there are 20 different games or variations to choose from in either 1 or 2 player variety. The variations change the speed of which the enemies move, and some levels can be played with only the red mutants. But in saying all that, there are a couple of flaws that keep it from getting that perfect score. For one thing, the game has the meaning of flickered down to an art. Every single time your ship fires its laser, it completely disappears from the screen for a second. Now, this leads to a certain glitch. Shoot your shot at the right time, which makes your ship disappear for that second, and an enemy spacecraft could go right through your ship. That certainly is a glitch. And then my other complaint is that upon shooting the asterisk looking enemies, many times one of their small fragments will just jump on top of your ship. I suppose these are just 2 very minor glitches that don't take much at all away from the enjoyment of the engaging gameplay. Everything else about Defender, whether it's its graphics, sound, gameplay, it has that nostalgic and classic feel to make it one of the best games for the Atari 2600. It's a definite classic for the system.
Dear Atari Anonymous, ever since my husband Luno returned from Earth with Asteroids, the new Atari home video game, he and the rest of the family do nothing but play Asteroids. Luno says Asteroids is good practice for his interplanetary life.
Bitty bitty, bitty bitty.
Tell me, dear Atari Anonymous, with everybody hooked on Asteroids, what on earth is a poor Martian mother to do?
New Atari Asteroids, now available for your home.
Okay, here's another classic number 6, it's Asteroids. Now, arcade ports in the Atari 2600 need to be taken with lowered expectations. The original arcade game turned heads in 1979 with its use of vector graphics, which, while lacking colour, gave the game a sharp look that was and still is quite eye-pleasing. And the sound design, well, that instilled tension with a low throb reminiscent of the Jaws theme, punctuated by that sharp alarm-like rings accompanying the arrival of a flying saucer. The gameplay was simple and fun. How cool is this game? I mean, you had a ship with a hyperspace jump and shields, and you're blasting space rocks. Arcade Asteroids still rocks even today. Then we come on to the Atari 2600. And I suppose the same is mostly true of this port. For a start, the Atari 2600 is incapable of doing vector graphics, so the asteroids have become colourful blobs, and the ships have become simple 9-pixel sprites. And the sound design, well, it's not as clear as the arcade, but it still works quite well at maintaining the tension. The gameplay has taken a couple of hits, but it still works. Due to the single fire button being used for shooting, pressing up becomes the ship's thrust, while down is used for another function. While the arcade machine gave access to both hyperspace and the shield, control limitations restrict the player to one or the other depending on the chosen game mode. The first game mode out of 66 is way too easy. I mean, my 3-year-old son could probably play this game mode. Take the time to check out the other modes, which, aside from determine whether you have hyperspace or shields, also determine the angles that the rocks travel when they break apart. The flying saucers can be turned on or off by flickering the difficulty switches. If the flying saucers are also turned on, the port is still easier than the original arcade, but it still gives a challenge. So, in summary, shooting rocks may seem lame, but Asteroids is still a blast. It is easily one of the best arcade ports on the system as long as you have enough imagination to call colourful blobs asteroids.
This is the new Frogger Home video game, Ribbit. It's just like the arcade games, very lifelike. Ribbit. See, you have to hop Frogger past these cars and trucks. Missed. Ribbit. Past the snakes, onto the logs, and the alligators in the river. Ribbit, ribbit. And back home to his lily pad. Whew. Frogger is absolutely riveting. The new Frogger Home video game. Bring it back to your pad.
Sega's arcade game, now a home video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
Okay, here we are. We're in the last top 5, and at number 5, it's Frogger. One of the most iconic titles to emerge from the early arcade boom, Frogger hasn't managed to maintain its popularity or recognition in the same way that games such as Pac-Man or Space Invaders have. Partly that's because it struggled with terrible or just plain misguided sequels in the post-8-bit era, but the first game remains an absolute classic and it's fantastic even as an Atari 2600 title. For the uninitiated, Frogger sees you cast as a frog, determined to cross a very busy road, then a particularly hazardous river, in order to make it to the safety of your lily pads. Though it's subject to quite a bit of flickering, it's impressive just how many moving parts and distinct elements, even colours, Frogger's Atari 2600 port has. It's really responsive too, very playable, even with the original rather stiff Atari joystick. Frogger is well worth your time. It's no wonder that games such as Crossy Road have proven to be so popular, sticking closely to the addictive basic formula that was originally created here. And you know what? This game sold 4 million copies. Wow.
Just last night, I was lost in the jungle with Pitfall Harry, surrounded by giant scorpions and man-eating crocodiles.
Well, Harry and I just grabbed the van, swung through the trees, and over the tar pits and found the jungle treasure. It was really neat.
If you haven't met Pitfall Harry, you're missing the year's most incredible video game adventure. Pitfall for the Atari 2600 and in television.
Since I met Pitfall Harry, no other man will do.
Pitfall, designed by David Crane for Activision.
Number 4, it's Pitfall. This game, well, it was developed by the talented David Crane for the Atari 2600 and it was released in September 1982 by Activision. Pitfall was one of those classic games before Super Mario Bros. Was released. And 40 years later, well, I've got to say that almost no one really cares about the Pitfall series anymore. However, it's also fair to say that this is one of the most successful games on this system, and it sold over 4 million copies. Pitfall today is considered to be a cult game where you have to practice over and over again if you ever want to finish the game. In this game, you take the role as Pitfall Harry, who was somehow ended up in a huge jungle. To get out of the jungle, he must search for 32 lost treasures. That's about the whole story in this game, but since the game is very old, you couldn't expect the game to have much of a story. Since we all know that a jungle is a very dangerous place, and since Pitfall Harry didn't think of bringing any weapons to kill the enemies that are trying to take his life, he just has to trust his jumping ability, which is enough for him to make it out of the jungle alive. And I have no idea why, but apparently he only has 20 minutes to escape from the jungle. And in the game, well, you're walking from one side of the screen to another, and there can be a lot of things in your way, like barrels, scorpions, pits, crocodiles, and snakes. So, to get past most of these enemies, you only have to jump and hope that you don't touch any of them. But if you can jump, then that means that you can evade almost anything. Unlucky for Pitfall Harry, there are ropes hanging in a few places that he can swing just like Tarzan, so he can get to the other side of pits and lakes. And for some reason, those barrels, they seem to roll over water, while Pitfall Harry can't swim. The poor guy. You almost wonder why he even bothered to travel to the jungle if he can't even swim. What Pitfall doesn't have that would make it a really great game is the reason that you want to play it. After a while, you will see that it is the same screens over and over again, except that they're in a different order. And the score system feels like it's no reason to try to get as high as possible, since you simply won't care about the score while you're playing the game. So for me, Pitfall is a fun game for a while, and it's great to kill some time, but it's not a great game, and I don't think I would give any reason for anybody to buy or play this game today. But in saying that, there's 4 million people out there that did buy the game, so what do I know?
It's Donkey Kong, the arcade sensation, and now you can play it at home.
Hang on, sweetheart! I'm gonna save ya!
Now you can play Donkey Kong on your ColecoVision, Atari VCS, or Intellivision video game system. Donkey Kong has multiple screens, just like the arcade game.
You're not gonna stop me, you stupid ape!
Play Donkey Kong on your ColecoVision, Atari VCS, or Intellivision video game system.
Don't worry, darling! I'll save you! Help me!
Okay, one of my best and favourite arcade games, and that is at number 3, which is Donkey Kong. You control Mario, and your mission is to rescue your girlfriend from the clutches of Donkey Kong. The action in this game takes place across 2 screens, rather than the 4 featured in the arcade version. The first tasks you with reaching the top of the screen while climbing ladders and jumping over barrels. There aren't any fireballs here, and the barrels don't move diagonally, but everything else is pretty much faithful. Graphically, the stage can be best described as functional, with Donkey Kong looking like a tasty gingerbread man and barrels resembling chocolate chip cookies. However, thankfully the gameplay is up to scratch with zero slowdown, flicker and great collision detection, all complemented by responsive controls. The second screen sees you attempting to remove all 8 rivets while dodging fireballs. Unfortunately, some of the challenge is lost as the fireballs can't move up or down ladders. And I suppose this allows you to safely camp on a ladder until the coast is clear. It's still somewhat entertaining, but the repetition of the same 2 screens does grow tiresome after a few rounds. It's a real shame that Coleco refused to use a 6K cartridge and instead tried to fit everything into 4K, as this seriously hinders the otherwise fun port. To make things worse, this is perhaps the easiest version of the game I've ever played. There's no difficulty settings either, and the challenge only seems to increase marginally as you progress. In fact, most times I lost a life was as a result of zooming out or trying to force Mario into a tricky situation in a lazy attempt to create some drama. So overall for me, Donkey Kong is an odd version of the arcade classic due to its lack of screens, but it plays well and it is a decent representation of the game. Due to the use of a minuscule 4K cartridge, it's not a patch on the superior ColecoVision, which was also released in 1982, but there's certainly some fun to be had, if only for a brief play session.
Out here we entertain ourselves at home, so we got an Atari video game. There's so many different games to play. We especially like Space Invaders, zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun, but personally I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
No other company offers you as many different video game cartridges as Atari.
Right, here we go, number 2, Space Invaders. Now, Space Invaders on the Atari 2600 is visually quite different in feel to the arcade original, with its overall aesthetic necessitated but lack of oomph in the Atari 2600 hardware. The fact that Space Invaders was brought home via the 2600 at all is impressive. What was created as far back as 1980 is even more so. Though it doesn't look much like Space Invaders unless you squint, all of the important elements are present and correct. You know, the shields, the bonus UFO, the aliens accelerating at panic-inducing rates as you destroy more and more of them. It's got limitations such as a lack of horizontal space you can use to pick off the aliens with your lasers, but for the most part, it's a nicely smooth and fast adaptation of the arcade game. And if you look at the box artwork, it does make a ridiculous claim, as it falls into the contains X video games trap, where X is the number of variations on basic Space Invaders included. That's a little bit fraudulent, don't you think? It is worth noting that there are lots of these though, even by the standards of its time, where these variations were just added in willy-nilly to pretty much all games. It certainly does provide you with all kinds of weird and wacky ways to play if you want to challenge yourself with things like invisible invaders, moving shields and much more besides. Believe it or not, there are a jaw-dropping 112 variations included in this cart. Now, there are plenty of other better single-screen shooters available for the Atari 2600, but when Space Invaders originally arrived, it really did bring the phenomena home. Until Pac-Man launched, Space Invaders was the top-selling cartridge for the Atari 2600, despite its technological limitations. It's no lazy port, and it definitely earned every one of those 6 million plus sales. It's a game that really sold the Atari to millions of people, and for a short time made it feel as if you could bring the arcade home, despite the differences in quality between the home and coin-op versions. Now, these days I would probably recommend numerous other shoot 'em ups for the Atari 2600, such as Phoenix to name one example, but this version of Space Invaders will always have a special place in my heart, and every now and then it's nice to take it for a little spin, for old time's sake.
Atari Pac-Man into your Atari video computer system and you're playing the hottest game since Space Invaders, Atari Pac-Man. I got Pac-Man fever. It's driving me crazy. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my... Hate to eat and run. Pac-Man by Atari.
First the Pac-Man eats through a maze of dots. Then the Pac-Man heads for the corner spots. Then he eats his fill of a power pill. And then all those ghosts turn blue, boo! And Pac-Man eats them all too.
Only Atari makes the Pac-Man home video game, and you can only play it on an Atari video game system.
Have you played Atari today? Man eats through a maze of dots. Then the Pac-Man heads for the corner spots. Then he eats his fill of a power pill. And then all those ghosts turn blue, boo! And Pac-Man eats them all too.
Have you played Pac-Man? It's the new video computer game everyone's talking about. And naturally, it's from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
And here it is, folks, the #1 selling game, and that game is Pac-Man. Pac-Man is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most classic games ever. It is a simplistic puzzle game featuring a yellow Pac-Man looking thing that goes around eating dots while avoiding ghosts. It may sound boring, but the game is incredibly fun and addictive once you start playing. The game may be the same as it is on every other console it started in, but overall, the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man is a fine game nevertheless. Pac-Man is a fun game to play, whether you are playing it on a Nintendo 64 or Atari 2600. The simplicity of the game may be just the best point of the game, because the game is not complex whatsoever. Now, with Pac-Man dominating what was then a very strong arcade scene, and Atari having a stranglehold over millions of homes thanks to the Atari 2600, surely a conversion of Pac-Man for the console would be an unqualified success, right? Not so sure. Well, okay, commercially, yes. The Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man sold a then astonishing 8 million copies, and for many years after release was the highest selling console game of all time. However, does this #1 selling game mean that it's a great game? Well, honestly, in my opinion, it doesn't. It's simply not very good. The maze layout, the animation, the flickering ghosts and the lack of colour are all factors that contribute to the feeling that despite being an officially licensed conversion, this particular port of Pac-Man feels like a cheap rip-off rather than the real deal. It's a game that I used to play a lot as a kid, not knowing any better. Revisiting it now reveals just how awful it is, especially as there are so many ways to play the arcade original at home, which does it no favours at all. The sequels, Miss Pac-Man and Junior Pac-Man, are both vastly superior games, and I would definitely advise tracking down one or both of them to play instead. If you really want a Pac-Man game for your Atari, then that's what you need to do. Okay folks, so there you go. That was the top 25 selling games on the Atari 2600. It's funny. I mean, most of the games are pretty good and do deserve to be in the top 25. However, isn't it interesting that two games which are heavily criticised for contributing to the gaming crash, you know, E.T. and Pac-Man, they're both in the top 10. Sure, both might have sold very well, but I have to say, they're not very good games. I mean, if this list was the top 25 best games ever made on the Atari 2600, then it would certainly look much more differently than the top 25 selling games. But anyway, there you go, that was the top 25 selling games on the Atari 2600. Now listen, thank you very much for watching my video, it's very much appreciated. Now, remember to share your thoughts on these games, leave a message, please like my video, and even better, subscribe to my channel. Until the next time, I'll see you all later. Bye bye.